different. 40, 50 years ago, we had a huge percentage of two-parent families. But today we have many forms of families. And as a church, we need to be able to minister to those families and to be an effective force in their lives for their needs and what they're facing, no matter what the family style in those many forms of families today. Used to be at the time authority wasn't questioned. Now everything's questioned. You know, there were certain positions and things that authority was just simply ascribed. But we live in a society today that authority is achieved. We have to achieve authority. 40, 50 years ago, it was a denominational era. We walked into our denomination. Now it's what people call the big box church era. It's not attached to denominations. Now I get my plug in for the United Methodist Church about our denomination. There's one thing that I can say that we can really be proud of in our denomination. We are accountable. We are accountable. Take a look through our book of discipline sometime. It demonstrates our accountability to one another, to our community, to our faith. We're accountable. We're responsible for our actions. What we say and what we do as a church and as individuals, we're accountable. And that's a great quality to have today. Even planning. Long-range planning, short-term planning. I think of that because we were at a meeting several months ago, and a couple of us from the congregation were there, and it's really stayed with me. One of the youth leaders was at that meeting. And was sharing about the difficulty in youth ministry today and how it's changed. You know, it used to be that you could plan something out 3, 4 months down the road, and youth would be able to say, sure, I'd like to do that, I want to do it, but the closer you get, more and more begin to fall off until the week before nobody's left. But he said, you know, if you get out your text and you text these youth today, and you say, you know, in 3 hours, we're going to a concert. You'll have a couple of carloads of kids show up. That's the change. That's the newness. Things are different. And we as a church need to respond in kind. We need to make the changes that are necessary to find the newness in ways that we can serve, in ways that we can minister, in the ways that we can be effective, in the ways that we can touch people's lives. And that's not easy because we've moved from a society of fellowship to Facebook. And that relational stuff isn't easy, but it's so important. I mean, I remember, some of us remember, of course, when there were no Sunday sales of virtually anything. Stores were closed. Now, Sunday seems to be one of the best shopping days. Not that it's right or wrong, it's just different. Activities on Sunday. Now we see an overabundance of activities. Not that it's right or wrong, but it's different. How do we minister? How do we be a church in that form of society? How do I respond as an individual of faith? We have to answer those questions and look at those questions and consider them very seriously because they're important for us and because change is not easy. I could ask everyone here to change seats when they come to church. Change seats today. Change where you're sitting. Sit somewhere else today. And guess what will happen next week? You'll be right back where you are now. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just human nature. It's hard to make those changes. It was difficult for those disciples. It's difficult for us. I mean, change isn't easy, but change is a part of life. It's a part of life, and we as a congregation, as a church, and as individuals need to be changing with the world around us. It's so important for us to do. Making those changes. Moving in those directions. Interesting, I saw a cute little story. Bear with me because I liked it, and I figured I was just going to share it with you. But it's a story about two fellows who grew up in the city, in Chicago. Never out of the city. Didn't know anything much about other than city life. That's all their life had been. They decided they had enough of it. So they bought a ranch out west and decided they were going to live like their ancestors and live on the ranch. Well, they went out to the ranch and started getting things ready and decided they needed to have a mule. So they went to a neighboring rancher and they asked him if he had any mules that they could purchase. And he said, "No, I don't have any. Sorry, can't help you." Well, they had some time on their hands, so they began to chat with the farmer. And as the rancher, and as they were doing, they looked over and saw a pile of items over there on one side of the barn. And it was a stack of watermelons. And they asked the rancher, "What are those?" And he was just kind of, he looked at these guys. He knew they were from the city. He knew they didn't know any better. And, as he looked at them, he kind of figured, these two guys are dumber than hoe handles, so I'm going to work them over a little bit. And so he says, "Oh, those are mule legs." I said, "Mule legs?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Wow." He said, "Yeah, you take one of those and you wait a while and then they'll hatch. They'll hatch out a mule." I thought, this is really cool. So they began to negotiate, and they bought one of the watermelons, one of these mule legs, and they put on the back of their pickup truck, and down they go on the bumpy road going home, anticipating someday this egg was going to hatch. Hit this big bump, this watermelon goes flying out, hits the road, and smashes open. The driver looks in his rearview mirror, looks back, and sees what had happened. He stops the truck, starts to turn around and go back, and while he's doing it, there's this big Texas jackrabbit. It's hopping along and sees that broken melon and jumps up there right in the middle of it and starts eating some of the melon. And these guys approach that melon, and as they get out of the truck, they look and see it there, and they see this long-eared critter right there in the middle of that melon. He said, "Our mule leg gets hatched." And so off they go toward that rabbit, and that jackrabbit looks up and sees him, and as rabbits do, it took off running. Off it goes. Rabbits have a tendency to run in a big circle. These guys are just running their legs off, just trying to catch this jackrabbit, just running as hard as they can, going in these circles. Finally, they're both just exhausted. They can't run anymore. And they flop down on the ground, trying to grasp for breath. They're sitting there on the ground, and one of them raises up to his elbows and says, "Well," he said, "looks like we lost our mule." The other man looked at him and said, "Yeah, but I'm not sure I wanted to plow that fast anyway." Think about the punchline. Change is hard. And sometimes we just don't think we want to plow that fast. But yet, even with our faith, sometimes we want just enough of our religion to get by. One theologian one time said, "Sometimes we have just enough religion to make us miserable." Well, you know something? I think Jesus said to those disciples, and he says to us, "I want you to have enough religion that you're going to be a miracle. A miracle of life. And a miracle of life, not only to yourself, but to others." And that is what Jesus offers. That's what this resurrected Lord is all about. Newness of life. Finding purpose and reason and newness even in the changing times of life itself, so that we can minister as individuals and as a congregation, as in the very words of Jesus who command us. That's who we are. That's what we're called to be. Our faith. It's a living faith and a living Lord. It's faith that calls us to be a miracle in life. To look at the changes going on around us and not stand back. But to make ourselves a part of that. Being effective in ministry. Not giving up our core values. Not surrendering our basic beliefs. But offering in such a way that it's new and it's fresh and it touches the very heart and the lives of people. That's what the resurrection did for those disciples. And that's what the resurrection does for us.